So given the complexity of the signs, why did cuneiform last 3,000 years? The most successful writing system ever.
Fair question. There are several factors. One is the famous factor of inertia.
Mhm.
The second thing is that people who could read and write and were in charge of archives and with the clerks in the temple and the writers for the king and everything commanded a very great deal of power because most of the public couldn't.
Mm.
So they reserved to themselves knowledge, understanding, philosophical inquiry. I mean, no doubt it went on in pubs and things, but they were in charge. They had everything under lock and key. And there were, I think the scribal schools are rather cliquey. They were certainly cliquey in the sense of Oxford and Cambridge being rivals, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
They had that sort of idea. And it was in no one's interest whatsoever. Nobody would ever concede any interest in the idea of literacy for all. This would be, it would never be thought of, and it would be anathema. And so if you got on a soapbox on a Saturday afternoon and say, enough of this, we have to teach the children, they'd be taken away, I think.
So we're getting in these tablets the output of the intellectual class, a very small fraction of humans. So we're getting just the Oxford and the Cambridge.
We are, except this, that when you went to scribal school, you had to learn Sumerian and Akkadian, the languages properly, and all the vocabulary and the grammar.
Mhm.
So some boys probably had a lot of trouble doing this, and, they were okay, but there ain't going to be no geniuses. And I think the situation in the school was that the teachers farmed out the kids who would actually rather have been outside playing football but could read and write to earning their living doing low-level reading and writing. That's to say, writing contracts, letters, everyday things for people, because no one could read and write. So you had to get a scribe if you're going to marry your daughter off, and you get all the witnesses about the presents and all this. All the thing had to be done for 4 days. So the writer would come and do. So your medium-level writers would serve that requirement, and very talented or clever or intellectual students would be encouraged to go into one of the literary professions, which would be, so to speak, medicine, law, working for the king, working for the church, the priesthood, so forth. All those things which were dependent upon archives and writing, they would find their niveau, and also architecture, because if a big building had to be built, then somebody had to know about load-bearing things and brick measurements, and so some of them went into that kind of work, and also probably some of them went into running the army, and you have to move stores and animals, and so they found their niveau, and some of them were intellectually very able indeed, and they went into the disciplines of, on the one hand, astrology, but more seriously into astronomy and theoretical grammar, because they had treatises about the relationship between the two languages and how they worked and the different parts of speech, and they wrote learned commentaries as well, what words meant. So there was an intellectual high level top, and then there were lots of professional scribes, and then the kids who left school as soon as possible and did all that, like today.